For the Sake of My Children. It is a narrative of a love story of a Christian Australian girl who fell in love with a Saudi Muslim man. The Western sweetheart converted to Islam and married her handsome Arab lover. Then she traveled with him to the Islamic world and spent 10 years in the Third World. After that, she returned to the Western world with 6 out of her 9 children and drafted her tragic life story in the Muslim world in a book entitled Irshad and the Abuse of Muslim Women. This love story was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by a reviewer who may quote brief paragraphs in a review to be printed in a newspaper, magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this book are fictitious and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 34. Are we heroes or traitors? As soon as she reached her residence, the angry Australian woman Irshad called her American boyfriend in the Guantanamo Bay detention center and complained about the way NATO forces dealt with the capture of the French terrorist leader, who was the most wanted Mujahid leader of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda groups. Her boyfriend told her that he did not know how the operation was carried out, but he was certain that Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi was captured and flown to a military base on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. But with regard to his American wife, Nadia Noor, the former guard in her solitary confinement in Gitmo prison said that he did not know anything about her. He told her that the arrest of the dangerous terrorist, Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi, was mentioned in the media and that the entire world knew about it. The news of the notorious terrorist's capture brings some relief to the Australian widow Irshad, but she remains concerned for the safety of her American friend Nadia. She knows that if Nadia is killed in the process, she will never be able to forgive herself for the rest of her life. At this moment, the mother, Irshad, remembered her wrong advice to her Canadian friend, Shahinaz, which led to the stoning of her daughter, Scheherazade, and the suicide of her other daughter, Shadia. Many years later, she could not forget and forgive herself for the brutal murder of that innocent, beautiful teenage girl, and the whipping of her handsome Syrian boyfriend on his bare back 100 lashes until he became a wheelchair-bound disabled person. Therefore, if her friend Nadia is killed in those airstrikes, Irshad's memory will be haunted again by the blood of another innocent foreign friend of hers. However, her American boyfriend warned her over the phone not to live among these terrorists after their supreme leader was arrested. He told her that the leaders of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban would try to find out who was the informant who revealed the hiding place of their secret leader, Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi. If they found out that she was the master of capture, they would definitely kill her. Irshad accepted the advice of her American lover and decided to leave Swat Valley as soon as possible. But she does not know what to do with the 2 small sons of her American friend Nadia. After some thinking, she decided to take the 2 kids and flee from those strongholds of terrorists. Whatever happened to their mother, Irshad does not want these 2 boys to live there and grow up as terrorists and end up killing themselves along with many innocent people like her sons Abu Bakr and Omar did. So, she went back to her former home, took her American friend's sons, and fled under cover of night. She paid an unemployed Pakistani man and bribed him into pretending to be her husband. The man became incredibly happy when he saw the huge amount of money that the white woman had given him. Therefore, he agreed to make a fake halal marriage contract with her with the help of an imam from a nearby mosque. She told him that she would pay him twice as much if he took her to where she planned to travel with her 2 sons. Although she married him in paper, Irshad never treated him as her lawful husband or thought of having sex with him. Her fake marriage with him reminded her about the Muhalil husband whom she was forced by her ex-husband Mustafa to marry to legalize her pussy. Until this day, the Australian woman could not erase from her memory the horrific rape she was subjected to by the ugly Muhalil man in her room in front of her Saudi husband. Fortunately, 2 weeks after she fled the strongholds of Islamic terrorists, The Australian widow learned through the media that her American friend Nadia Noor and the 3 other Muslim wives of Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi had been arrested with him and flown to Afghanistan. The U.S. government refused to allow the Afghan authorities to imprison Mullah Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi. Accordingly, the captured terrorist leader was transferred to a prison in the United States. Irshad heard this news after she reached Islamabad city. The news was both a relief and a source of sadness for her. Once again, Irshad thought the CIA agents had not kept their promise to send her friend Nadia home as a heroine and not as the wife of a dangerous Muslim terrorist. Because of this, she called her white American boyfriend and asked him to put her in touch with the top CIA agents she had spoken to before. When she spoke to some of these senior agents, Irshad learned that she was entitled to collect $50 million for revealing the hiding place of the notorious French terrorist, alias Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi. Moreover, they assure her that her American friend Nadia will not go to any prison upon her arrival in her native United States, but that she will be received with honor. She is also told that Nadia Noor is likewise entitled to a $50 million reward for cooperating with the U.S. Marines in capturing a dangerous Frenchman who became a top Islamic terrorist leader in Pakistan and Afghanistan. As for the other 3 wives of the French terrorist, they have been handed over to the Afghan police. The evil terrorist Mullah Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi is being held in a maximum security prison in the States awaiting his trial. After revealing these details to her, the CIA agents told the Australian widow to go to the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad and get a free plane ticket and a visa to the States. Then she informed the agents about the 2 sons of her brave American friend, Nadia, and asked to give them 2 passports and 2 visas to enter their mother's homeland, the United States of America. The CIA agents accepted her request and promised to arrange their travel papers as soon as possible. A month later, the Australian widow and her friend Nadia's 2 children arrived in New York. She had delayed her trip until the children of her friend had obtained their travel documents and visas from the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad. At the New York International Airport, they were received by some officials from the government. The representatives informed Irshad that she had been booked into a 5-star hotel for a week. All costs of her stay and other expenses will be covered. However, she is expected to leave the USA in just 1 week. Under no circumstances can she extend her stay for more than 7 days. They also handed to the Australian woman Irshad Al-Shamari a check for $50 million at the same international airport when she landed with the 2 children. With regard to the 2 sons of her American friend Nadia Noor, they promised to transfer them to their mother, who at that time lived with her parents in the city of Chicago. The Australian widow Irshad was disappointed by the restrictions the U.S. government placed on her residency. She has a 6-month visa issued to her in Islamabad by the U.S. Embassy. Why don't they want her to stay more than 7 days? She expected to be greeted with wreaths and honors. She thought there would be media coverage of her arrival at New York International Airport, but then she found out that they didn't even want her to stay more than a week on American soil. They refused to let her take her American friend's 2 children to their mother. Why don't they want her to meet her friend and spend 6 months in the U.S.? During her journey from Islamabad to New York, Irshad made many plans and had many sweet dreams. She planned to stay in the United States and compete with the Canadian government for custody of her 6 children. She even expected the U.S. government to help her get her children back. She also wants to meet her American friend Nadia Noor and spend quality time with her. Alas, all those plans and dreams vanished on her arrival at New York International Airport. The Australian woman realized that if she followed the dictates of the American government, her name would be associated with terrorists forever. Wherever she goes, she will be treated as a treacherous and evil Muslim woman and is always described as the wife of a notorious Arab terrorist Muslim man. Even the name of her American friend Nadia will always stink with the reputation of being the wife of the evil terrorist leader who has ever been at the surface of the earth, and in his wickedness, he comes after God's alleged prophet Muhammad and Osama bin Laden. Her children will be treated badly wherever they go and whatever they become in American society. The Australian widow, Irshad, believed that the CIA expected her and her American friend, Nadia, to be satisfied with the massive amounts of money they gave them. For Ershad, her dignity and reputation are more precious than silver and gold. Therefore, she decided to never leave the United States until her name and that of her American friend were separated from the stigma of being the wives of notorious terrorists. Until the government of the United States of America apologized to her for imprisoning her for 4 years in Guantanamo Bay Detention Center among those Islamic terrorists, and she never committed a crime. Until her children are returned to her, she will not go anywhere without them. To achieve these goals, the angry Australian woman decided to go to the media and expose such cover-up abuses. She wants everyone to know how she and her American friend risked their lives to help the CIA capture the dangerous terrorist Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi. She also wants the world to know that some senior CIA agents did not keep their promise to receive Nadia Noor and her with honor. Instead of giving them credibility, the CIA agents attributed it to 2 cowardly Western women who refused to be named for fear of terrorists. Moreover, she would like the Americans to know that rather than allowing her to stay 6 months in their country, the CIA agents wanted her to return to her native Australia as soon as possible. As if her extended stay of more than a week on American soil might lead to something more terrible than the cowardly terrorist attacks of September 11th. Chapter 35. Her first controversial speeches. Widowed Australian Irshad Al-Shamari found the New York Times contact number in her phone book at the front desk of her hotel. She tried several times to speak to someone, but each time her call was forwarded to the answering machine registered to the phone. Irshad learned from that recorded message that her call might not be answered for an exceedingly long time. She worries that if she leaves a message, they might not get back to her for weeks. She looked for other newspapers, but got the same response. After that, she started searching for some TV channels. Most of the popular channels such as CNN and Fox News suffer from the same problem. As a result, the Australian widow Irshad Al-Shamari is about to give up the idea of exposing the CIA agents who failed to keep their promise to her and her American friend Nadia Noor. But suddenly an idea popped into her mind, and she decided to work on it. She felt as if the idea is a heavenly revelation inspired by the Holy Spirit to her. She decides to head to the nearest police station and file a complaint against these CIA agents who have disappointed her and her American friend. She expected the police to either consider her a fraud and kick her out, or take her complaint seriously and act on it. Either way, she understood that this was her last open option. Howbeit, the American police did not respond as the Australian Irshad had expected. They did not expel her and did not accept her complaint. They first asked her to provide evidence that she was behind the arrest of the notorious Muslim terrorist leader, Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi. At first, Irshad tried to prove her claim by showing her air ticket and American visa from Islamabad to New York issued to her by the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan. The police told her that the ticket did not show that it was issued by whom and who paid for her air ticket. A visa can even be issued to anyone who has received permission to enter America. The Australian woman Irshad would have given up on her plan to sue the CIA office and return to her hotel if it weren't for a second thought popped into her mind out of nowhere. She shouted her thought as loudly as she could as if she were afraid it might fade out of her mind at any moment. She showed the police a copy of the $50 million check she had received from the U.S. government as a reward for revealing the hiding place of the dangerous foreign terrorist Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi. Consequently, the U.S. police found it difficult to dismiss her complaint. In the United States, police officers love nothing more than publicity. Therefore, once Irshad filed her complaint against some top CIA agents who refused to fulfill their promise to honor her and her American friend Nadia, the matter leaked to the media. All the newspapers, magazines, and TV channels that Irshad could not have been able to contact before reported her grievance on their front pages, and it became breaking news on almost every television channel in America. It was broadcast by CNN and Fox News. Other international channels such as BBC World News TV, Al Jazeera Satellite Channel, Al Arabiya TV, Radio Monte Carlo, and France 24 also picked up the news and circulated it around the world. Accordingly, the Australian widow, Irshad, was interviewed by several journalists and other broadcasters after news of her complaint reached the American tabloid media. Accordingly, overnight the Australian woman Irshad Al-Shamari became famous, and everyone in the media and everyone wanted to meet and talk to her. Some human rights activists, women's rights activists, American feminists, high school teachers, and university professors approached her and conducted interviews with her. She was praised for her courage and willingness to help the American Marines and other NATO troops in a dangerous place like Swat Valley in Pakistan, where there are strongholds of Islamic terrorists. At first, Irshad is unwilling to reveal to the media her tragic past life in the Muslim world. She just focused on her recent problem with the CIA. Some media professionals from Canada and Australia connected the dots and got to know who Irshad was. They revealed to the outside world that her late Saudi Muslim husband was among those 19 Muslim terrorists who took part in the cowardly attacks on New York on September 11, 2001. This subsequent information made her case sensational news and prompted the media to pressure the CIA to answer many urgent questions. And pressing. Why did the CIA imprison the Australian woman for 4 years in Guantanamo Bay Detention Center for not committing any crime other than marrying a Muslim man? Why did the Canadian authorities deprive her of her 6 children? Why did the CIA agents who paid her a bounty of $50 million ask her to leave America in a week's time? Why was she not received as a hero and not as the wife of a terrorist as promised by them? Why was she not praised and honored for revealing the hideout of the notorious terrorist Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Nur al-Fransawi? These questions gave the U.S. government and the Canadian government real nightmares. Shortly thereafter, the Australian woman received official apologies from the U.S. and Canadian governments. The CIA department could be able to clear itself of the latter accusation on the grounds that the informant's name would not be released to the public for safety purposes. When an informant assists police in thwarting a terrorist plot, it is CIA policy not to reveal his name to the public even if that person wishes to be identified. Regarding Irshad's imprisonment of 4 years in Guantanamo Bay without committing a crime, the CIA said she was arrested in Canada due to her immigrating to the country under a fake name Iman Atta, and falsely claiming to be an American citizen when she was not. Moreover, her association with terrorists for many years made her vulnerable to arrest and detention for legal accountability. Therefore, the CIA believed that the Australian Muslim woman, Irshad Al-Shamari, did not deserve honor or an apology at that time. But her later heroic action with the help of the CIA in capturing Mullah Sheikh Mohammed Nur al-Fransawi proved her claim that she was innocent and had nothing to do with what her husband did in New York on September 11th. While the Canadian government not only apologized to Irshad for handing her over to the CIA, but agreed to settle the matter by paying her $10 million in compensation. Furthermore, the Toronto government allowed her to claim custody of her 6 children as quickly and easily as possible. In addition, her refugee status was restored, and she was resettled as a persecuted refugee Muslim woman in Canada. Irshad immediately moved to Toronto and took back all of her 6 children. This time she did not enter Canada like a thief in the night and lived incognito as she did before. Soon after her arrival, she began speaking out publicly and in the media against the teachings of the Quran and hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, which she believes are behind all the terrorist attacks, assaults, persecution, abuse, and violence against Muslim women. She also spoke openly about her bitter experience in Saudi Arabia. She spoke about the abuse of young Saudi girls as children through the vicious practice of female genital mutilation. Authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad justified such kind of barbaric and inhumane practices against female children when they were at the age of 4 or 5. The Australian woman also referred to the case of her eldest daughter, Aisha, who was subjected to such brutal procedure of FGM when she was 4 years old. The same practice of circumcision was carried out on her other 2 daughters in Afghanistan against her wishes. She also spoke about the evil practice of child marriage of small Muslim girls, which is also based on the hadiths of the Prophet of Islam, as well as a verse from the Quran, in Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4. Irshad gave the example of the Prophet Muhammad's scandalous marriage to the child daughter of his friend Abu Bakr, whom he married when she was 6 years old, raped her, and began physically abusing her when she was 9 years old. Her daughter, Aisha, was also married at the age of 10 to an old Afghani man without her mother's knowledge or consent. The Muslim man who married her is 70 years old, and that is older than her grandfather. She also showed the scars of severe beatings on her body at the hands of her late Muslim husband, who had been brutally beating her and violating the sanctity of her body in abnormal and humiliating sexual ways over a period of 7 years. She referred to the Quranic verse that allows a man to beat his nashis wife, i.e., the disobedient wife, or the father chastises his rebellious daughter, in Surat Al-Nisa 4, verse number 34. The Australian widow, Irshad, was not limited to speaking only in Canada. She was invited by some respected people in France to come to Paris and talk about Islamic misogynistic teachings on women and Islamic terrorists. Upon her arrival, she gave 2 consecutive speeches in one of the most spacious halls in the French capital. Her talk about the abuse of Muslim women sparked a lot of controversy and resentment among Muslims. Muslim men and women alike in France accused her of lying and fabricating hadiths about the Prophet Muhammad. In her sermons, Irshad elaborated on the status of women in Islam. One of the phrases she said that annoyed Muslim men, as well as Muslim women, was that Islam treats women like animals or something lower than animals. She cited some hadiths of the Messenger of Allah Muhammad in his saying, "A woman is like a goat and a she-camel because everything is mounted." That means Allah created a woman like any female animal for the Muslim man to climb over her body and fuck her. All these female creatures, goats, she-camel, and woman, are made to climb on and have sex with by their male counterparts. This bad hadith shows us how Muhammad reduced the woman to a sexual being created by God for the man to climb her body and fuck her as a dog fucks its bitch. Muhammad also said, "The dog, the donkey, and the woman invalidate the man's prayer if they pass in front of him while he is praying, and for this reason, they cut off the prayer between the worshipper and the Qibla." This offensive and misogynistic hadith, intended to show the woman as a defiled creature and therefore as impure, invalidates the man's prayer. There's a verse in the Quran that compares a woman to feces, and that is why she defiles a man and invalidates his ablution. O you who have believed, do not approach prayer when you are intoxicated until you know what you are saying. And if you are sick or on a journey, or one of you comes from the stool, or you have touched women, and you cannot find water, then do tayammum, or ablution on soil, so wipe your faces and your hands with sand. Indeed, God is forgiving. Surah An-Nisa 4, verse 43. Abu Umama narrated, "The Messenger of God, may God's prayers and peace be upon him, said, everyone whom God enters into paradise marries 72 wives, 2 of whom are virgins of the wide eye. And 70 of his inheritance are from the inhabitants of hell, and all of them have sexual organs that are intensely lustful for sex, and he has an erect penis that does not bend, and the virgin always has a pussy that craves for fucking. She has a lustful pussy, and he has a long dick like a pulverized palm tree, and the virgin o' paradise has a large butt or ass that is a mile wide." This vulgar hadith reveals to us how the mentality of the alleged prophet of God, Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Kilab, was preoccupied with women and practicing sexual intercourse with them. The second speech of the Australian woman Irshad angered the Muslims and pushed them to fill the streets of Paris, demonstrating against those who invited the infidel Australian Christian woman impersonating a Muslimah woman to the country and gave her a platform to insult their beautiful religion, Islam, the religion of peace, and their infallible prophet Muhammad. They claimed that there is no other religion in the world that honors women and puts them in the best social status as Islam. In this speech, the white woman Irshad spoke about Muslim terrorists. According to her, the Muslim terrorist is a hopeless case because he was indoctrinated by the verses of the Quran and hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, which made him an extremely dangerous creature for humanity. It is impossible to convince a Muslim terrorist that he is wrong. The Muslim terrorist is true and loyal to his religion, and everything he does is justified by citing religious authority based on the teachings of the Quran and the hadiths of his prophet. The Sudanese Muslim scholar, Dr. Ahmed al-Mustafa al-Dali said in one of his radio programs that he broadcasts every Sunday from Washington, USA, "No Muslim scholar can dare say that Osama bin Laden is not a true Muslim." According to Dr. al-Dali, Osama bin Laden practiced Islam as taught by the Prophet Muhammad to the Muslim community in the 7th century AD. Another white Australian woman who converted to Islam and became committed to the true teachings of the Quran and Hadith said, "The Taliban Muslims practice the pure and true form of Islam taught by the Prophet Muhammad to his early followers and so untainted by subsequent generations of Muslim leaders and scholars." The same white foreign woman faithful to her Islamic religion said the war on terror is the war on Islam. This means that she understood that Muslim terrorists are the true followers of Islam. The so-called terrorists of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Boko Haram, and the Muslim Brotherhood practiced their religion the way their Prophet Muhammad wanted them to do. The so-called Prophet of God taught his Muslim followers to hate Jews and Christians and not to allow them to hold any leadership positions and called them brothers of apes and pigs. According to the Prophet's command to his followers, whenever a Muslim meets a Christian or a Jew on the road, he is not supposed to greet him or try to make it difficult for him to walk down the street. So, Islam requires a true Muslim to curse Jews and Christians and consider them to be descendants of apes and pigs, as the Prophet Muhammad did. According to Islamic law, Jews and Christians are not allowed to own weapons and marry Muslim women, but Muslim men can marry Jewish and Christian women. Jews and Christians were not allowed to ride horses or camels. They were the two noble animals in Muhammad's time. Christians living in the Middle East or North Africa are not allowed to build new churches in Muslim countries or to repair their existing churches. Likewise, Jews and Christians must wear humiliating clothes that distinguish them from Muslims, cut the front hairs of their heads, walk in the streets with half-closed eyes, and accept abuse and mistreatment by Muslims on the roads. They should have low doors in their homes, with no lights on them. They are not allowed to preach their religions to Muslims, while Muslims must force their religion on them if they refuse to accept Islam or pay the jizya. If a Muslim becomes a Christian, must be killed as an apostate, whereas if a Christian becomes a Muslim, must receive money from the Islamic treasury. Likewise, a Muslim man is allowed to marry a Christian woman, while a Christian man is not allowed to marry Muslima woman. According to Irshad, the best way to deal with the Muslim terrorist is to eliminate him. He is like a cancer that if it is not removed affects other parts of the body. She also believes that a Muslim terrorist is more dangerous if he is captured and imprisoned. He will pass his incurable contagious disease onto other prison inmates who are either Christians, atheists, or agnostics. It has become a common phenomenon in Western countries, especially in the United States. The notorious criminals are now and then converted to Islam by their Muslim inmates, and when they get out, they become homegrown terrorists or travel to the Middle East and join the modern Islamic terrorist groups. Today, there are 86 Islamic terrorist groups in the world. The white Australian woman, Irshad, illustrated her point by likening a Muslim terrorist to a computer virus. If we leave it in our system, it will destroy it, and if we isolate it, the virus will always be a threat. The only way to deal with a terrorist is to remove him from human society. Therefore, the Australian woman, Irshad Al-Shamari, strongly supports NATO's war on terror in Afghanistan and the US-led coalition against the Islamic State's caliphate group in Syria and Iraq. Irshad concluded her speech by saying that it is the duty of non-Muslim forces to fight, defeat, and destroy Islamic terrorism wherever it exists. For her, Muslims should not be allowed to implement Sharia law, even in their own Islamic lands and countries. There are about 55 Muslim-majority countries in the world. These countries must be secularized and prevented from becoming Islamic countries. The lukewarm so-called moderate Muslims should only be commended and encouraged to stay that way. After listening to her speeches in France on the abuse of women in Islam and Islamic terrorism, it seemed to many people that the fearless Australian woman Irshad was created by God for a noble cause. No one in the history of mankind dared to challenge or question these Islamic beliefs without finding himself fighting with his hands and teeth against the great Satan, who is called in Arabic the damned Iblis. For more than 14 centuries, the world has been terrorized and feared by the Islamic teachings of terrorism and the law of apostasy. If anyone refuses to accept Muhammad as the messenger of God, he exposes himself to physical annihilation. His wife, children, property, and livestock must be seized by the Muslim mujahideen. If any human mind dared to criticize the teachings of the alleged prophet of God Muhammad, he would be subject to terrorist attacks from the Muslims of the world. If one of the followers of the alleged messenger of Allah renounced his religion, he would be judged an apostate and put to death. By using these two doctrines, jihad against the infidels to spread Islam and kill the apostates on the basis of the law of apostasy, Satan has terrorized and terrified people for a long time and made criticism of these Islamic teachings taboo. Chapter 36. In search of her kidnapped and raped daughter. After her successful speeches in Paris, France, the Australian mother, Ershad, decided to return to Afghanistan and search for her eldest daughter, Aisha, who had been kidnapped, raped, and imprisoned by Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. Then she called the babysitter of her 6 children in Canada and asked her to extend her stay at her apartment in Toronto. When the babysitter agreed to continue taking care of her children, Irshad decided to return to Kandahar, Afghanistan. She knew and understood that such a trip involved high risks and might expose her to terrorist attacks. Despite this, the brave Australian mother is no longer a persecuted Muslim, but rather a Christian who believes in God and knows that Afghanistan is not what it used to be. When she was living under persecution and violence, the country was controlled by the Taliban government and the Al-Qaeda group, while she was under the control of her abusive Muslim husband. But after NATO forces entered the country and removed the Taliban government from power, a lot of changes happened. Mother Ershad decides to travel undercover and pretend to be a Muslim woman again. So, she flew straight from Paris to Kabul. When she arrived at the international airport of the Afghan capital city, the white Australian woman was wearing the abaya and the Islamic veil. Wherefore, no one was able to identify her as a foreigner until she reached the hotel. As she travels from the airport to the hotel, she is stunned by the changes that have taken place during those years she has spent abroad. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw women walking the streets without their husbands or muharram men accompanying one of them. Young girls with backpacks are heading to their schools. Some women walk without their faces hidden behind the humiliating Islamic burqa, which was compulsory attire for every woman under the Taliban reign of terror. The Australian woman was also stunned when she saw some Afghan Muslim men wearing Western clothes such as shirts and trousers. Despite this, the white foreign widow saw outdated that still held the people of Afghanistan in the ancient dark ages of the 7th century AD, at the time of the Arab prophet Muhammad. Some Muslim women cover their faces completely like eerie black ghosts, and some Afghan men still grow terrifyingly long beards and dress like the mujahideen she knows from her bitter past experience. From Kabul, the Australian woman flew to Kandahar the next day. Once in that hellish city, the horribly abused Australian woman recalled the dark years she spent with those mujahideen barbarians and her cruel Arab Muslim husband, Mustafa. It was as if she was rewatching a scary horror movie all over again when her mind began to reproduce those horrific memories of her torture and abuse. She could still see the innocent Canadian Muslim girl, Scheherazade, as she lay dying under those stones and bricks that had been thrown over her tender body half buried in the hot earth when she was brutally stoned for her alleged adultery with her Syrian lover. She recalled her experience of being kidnapped and imprisoned in that tomb shrine for 2 days and her agonizing suffering with the head of the village of Sharif al-Banat, the human beast who tried to rape her in his home. She recalled her unjust imprisonment for 12 months in a death concentration camp euphemistically called the Nawashi's Women's Prison in Kandahar city. She couldn't believe she was able to survive in that dangerous prison. She knows that in that infernal city, she was subjected to many cases of abuse and violence, and her daughter was repeatedly raped by that evil old man, and she is still being abused and imprisoned until the present time. In her heart, she wished to find him and kill him with her own hands. She also remembered that this evil Muslim old man turned some of her children into slaves and beggars in the streets of Kandahar, and her daughters into slaves for his Afghan wives. The same city reminded her of her two sons who were kidnapped from her hands at gunpoint and turned into terrorists and killed in the jihad war for the sake of God. She understood that her husband, the Arab Muslim terrorist Mustafa, was responsible for all the suffering and abuse that she and their 7 children went through. He also participated in the cowardly terrorist attacks in the United States on September 11, 2001, which claimed the lives of 3,000 innocent Americans in one day. Memories of those dark years made the Australian widow, Irshad, wish to undergo brain surgery to erase her memory and get her out of it forever. She would pay any amount of money to any doctor if he could erase from her brain the horrific memories of those 10 years of abuse and oppression she spent in the Muslim world with her terrorist husband and those ruthless Islamic mujahideen. As soon as she arrived in Kandahar, the mother, Irshad, began searching for her daughter, Aisha, who was kidnapped and raped years ago. She wanted to look for a needle in a haystack. She returned to the place where the Mujahideen and their families used to live and train in the war of jihad for the sake of God against the so-called unclean infidels and the hypocritical and apostate Muslims. She remembered what had happened when she and her husband and their 7 children were stuffed like eggs in a carton or squashed like sardines in a small can in their filthy tent without windows and sanitary ventilation. Irshad found the place in ruins and not inhabited by any creatures, whether humans or animals. It seems that even millions of vampire mosquitoes and billions of flies have migrated somewhere. Thus, from the first day of her search in Kandahar city, the Australian mother has given up hope of finding her lost daughter. She learned from some people that all the Afghan Taliban fighters and the Arab Mujahideen have fled Afghanistan and are now hiding in the Swat Valley in Pakistan. Some of them hide in the caves of Tora Bora in the Indian Caucasus region in the mountain range of eastern Afghanistan. The Australian widow, Irshad, knows that she will impose the death penalty on herself if she dares to travel to the strongholds of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda after the entire world learned that she had revealed the hiding place of the notorious white terrorist Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi. Moreover, her controversial religious speeches against Islam, which she delivered publicly in the capital of France, would be another factor that would prove her apostasy from Islam and her return to Christianity. At first, the foreign mother, Irshad, decided to give up the idea of finding her kidnapped daughter, Aisha. But suddenly she remembered that Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid was living in his big mansion with his Afghan wives and their sons and daughters in the best area of the city. He used to come every morning to the camps of the Mujahideen, and he would return home late in the evening. Therefore, Irshad concluded that he was either still living in Kandahar with his many wives and offspring, or he had escaped during NATO airstrikes and strayed into the mountains or crossed the border and entered the Swat Valley in Pakistan. But Irshad, the Australian mother, doubted that the aged mullah would be able to escape with so many of his families and children in such a brief time. She recalled how she, her 6 children, and many other families and their children had to flee the very day the foreign deadly airstrikes began. It took them several days to travel by animals and on foot to reach Pakistan. Mother Irshad's hope was revived when she came to this conclusion. So, she decided to search for the evil old Muslim polygamist who loved to have sex with underage girls like her 10-year-old daughter in Kandahar city. She found the task too difficult for her alone to find someone in such a large and populous city. She decided to hire some people to do the research for her. Therefore, she went to the city center, found some unemployed Afghans, paid them a lot of money, and told them that she was looking for a married Muslima girl named Aisha Mustafa al-Shamari. She told them that the girl was married to a man named Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. By the way, in Muslim countries a woman does not take her husband's last name after marrying him and will continue to bear her father's name and his family name until her death. Therefore, every Muslima in the world, whether she is married or unmarried, carries her maiden name, which is very confusing and misleading to non-Muslims in Western countries. The mother, Irshad, promised to pay these hired workers more than 10 times what she gave them as an advance if they helped her find her daughter, Aisha Al-Shamari. While searching for the kidnapped and raped daughter, her Australian mother lives in a downtown hotel. She kept to herself most of the time inside her room. She does not want any of the Afghan people to recognize her, especially the women who knew her during her stay with them in the Mujahideen camps. After a week of intense searching, an Afghan hired female searcher came in with some information about her daughter. Although the name of the married woman found by the Afghani woman matched the name of her daughter, her husband's name was different. The wife's name is Aisha Al-Shamari, but her husband is known as Mullah Omar Bismillah, whose last name means in the name of God. This venerable Mullah Omar, in the name of God, is the Imam of the great mosque in the city center. The educated and intelligent Australian mother did not take another second to conclude that the wife was her daughter, Aisha, and that the husband, Omar Bismillah, or in the name of Allah, was Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid himself. It is understanding that after the Taliban were ousted from power, the wicked mullah most likely changed his name to hide his identity as a former terrorist leader. If the new Afghan government finds out that he is one of the Taliban leaders who used to train the Mujahideen and send them to kill innocent people, he will be executed or sent behind bars for the rest of his life. The white foreign mother, Irshad, decides to confirm her conclusion before going to the Afghan police and revealing the true identity of the evil old mullah. She understood that she would not be able to enter the house where the Afghan woman found her daughter Aisha without putting herself in danger. She knows that the evil terrorist man will do everything to prevent her from revealing his identity and put him in serious trouble with the new Afghan authority. First, Irshad decided to go to the Grand Mosque in downtown Kandahar and find out if Mullah Omar Bismillah is the same Muslim old man who kidnapped, raped, and still abused and imprisoned her daughter Aisha in the name of permissible child marriage in Islam. After that, the Australian mother, Irshad, took a taxi from the hotel to the biggest mosque. She knows that women are not allowed to enter the mosque, so Irshad waited outside until the worshippers had finished the noon prayer and left in droves. She stayed inside the taxi and continued to check out the Afghan Muslim men who were emerging from the mosque in large groups one after the other. After waiting for some time, the angry Australian mother saw that her sworn enemy, who betrayed the trust, kidnapped, and raped her minor child, who was 10 years old, was coming out of the mosque, followed by some bearded Afghans. These Muslim men do for him what no rational person would do, even with his God. Some of them kiss his hands, and some of them kneel and kiss the ground that his feet touch, and others drink the dirty water that he had used during his ablution to clean his hands, feet, face, head, mouth, and nose, and others carry his belongings. To this day, the Imam of the mosque, or the religious leader in Islam, is treated in the same way that the Prophet Muhammad was treated in his time, except that Muslims today do not seek blessings from his spit and urine as the companions of the Messenger of Allah Muhammad used to do with bodily waste after emptying his putrid waste such as urine, feces, and spit. The brave mother, Irshad, wished to have a weapon in her hands so that she could blow up Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid's forehead, where the prayer sign is located, which seemed to her like the sign of the beast 666 that mentioned in the Book of Revelation of the Holy Bible about the Antichrist. Somehow, the Australian mother, who was gripped by righteous anger, managed to control her wrath and waited until the humanoid beast got into his car and his chauffeur drove him away. Immediately, Irshad asked the taxi driver to follow his car. The taxi drove behind the Imam's car without his knowledge. When his car arrived at his large house, the angry white woman waited until he got out of his car and entered. Then she quickly wrote down his address and asked her cab driver to take her to her hotel. Inside the room, she contemplated her next move before leaving her hotel again. Instead of going to Kandahar City Police Station, the white Australian foreign mother decided to take the matter up to NATO forces. Her experience with Muslim men in the Muslim world made her understand that the power of the Islamic police is more dangerous to society than any other government department. Instead of punishing her Arab husband, Mustafa, when he tried to kill her, the Saudi police let him go. Moreover, when the evil chief of Sharaf al-Banat village, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed, tried to rape her inside his home, the Sharia court directed his heinous crime against her and sentenced her to 1 year in prison, releasing the rapist as a hero. Similarly, the Australian mother, Irshad, expected the same thing to happen if she filed her complaint against the kidnapper, rapist, and abuser of her daughter to the Afghan police. Deciding on her next step, Irshad changed her Islamic clothing, abaya and niqab, into a Western shirt and trousers. She pretended to be an Australian foreign reporter and walked towards a NATO checkpoint manned by Canadian soldiers. After being thoroughly vetted, the white Australian reporter Irshad was allowed to enter the military premises. Once inside, she spoke to a senior military general and told him that she had come to reveal the hiding place of a dangerous former Mujahideen leader. The senior general took her complaint seriously and asked her to give a full report on how she knew about the terrorist leader and where he was at the moment. When the brave Australian mother provided all the information required, an arrest warrant was issued for Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who is now known as Imam Omar Bismillah. That same evening, the imam of the city's largest mosque, Umar Sayyidinallah, was surprised when more than 30 foreign soldiers raided his house and arrested him. The arrest of the terrorist leader, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who became known as Imam Omar Bismillah, was one of the most important arrests that took place that year. The brave Australian woman learned that she deserves $50,000 in exchange for revealing the whereabouts of the terrorist leader, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who changed his identity and claimed that he was the Imam of the Grand Mosque, Sheikh Omar Bismillah. Afghan police have listed him as one of the most wanted terrorist leaders dead or alive in the country. Mullah Abu Hamid was unable to deny his true identity, as Irshad's daughter was found in his home with the 3 children she had with him. Aisha is approaching the age of 19 when she is freed from the tyranny of that evil old man who started raping and assaulting her since the age of 10. For 9 years, she was kidnapped, raped, imprisoned, and repeatedly abused by this sinister old Muslim man. When the Australian mother, Irshad, saw her beloved daughter, Aisha, after many years of painful separation, she did not know whether to cry or rejoice. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw her daughter coming out of the evil mullah's house with her 3 young children. She has 2 sons and 1 daughter from her kidnapper and abuser. Australian mother Irshad started crying when she realized that the old Afghan mullah's wives had reduced her daughter to the status of a maidservant. Irshad hugged her and started crying bitterly. Aisha recognizes her mother, Irshad, and starts crying too. She didn't expect her Australian mother to come back to Afghanistan and look for her. The evil mullah has poisoned the mind of the little girl Aisha and made her believe that her mother left her with her siblings forever and fled to her motherland, Australia, the land of the Christian infidels, because she wants to marry a white man like her. Therefore, throughout these lean years, Aisha places the blame for her kidnapping, rape, persecution, pain, and torment of her and her siblings on her selfish Western mother, who abandoned her 7 children for the pleasures of this fleeting world. She did not know that her mother had returned to the Mujahideen camps and had obtained custody of her children. The mullah lied to her and told her that her 6 siblings were sent to the family of their late father Mustafa in Saudi Arabia because Islam forbids their adoption by him because he is not related to them by blood. In any case, on the same day, Mullah Abu Hamid was arrested, handcuffed, and dragged like a notorious criminal from his big house, and it happened that the Australian woman, Irshad al-Shamari, was with the military authority that arrested him. She defied all Western military restrictions and ran towards the kidnapper and rapist of her innocent child, Aisha, slapped him on the head, and then spit on his face. She also grabbed his long beard and began to pull it, then put her hands on his neck and proceeded to strangle him until the cowardly mullah cried for escape from the white demon foreign woman before she strangled him to death. Some NATO commandos quickly respond and catch the enraged Australian mother Ashad before she can kill the old goat. Despite being subdued and brought under control, the angry white woman still kept cursing the evil mullah with all kinds of nasty Afghani words that suited him. Her righteous wrath was only calmed when the general in charge who led the arrest team assured her that the terrorist leader, Muhammad Abu Hamid, would never get out of prison. Either he will spend the rest of his life behind bars, or he will be tried, convicted, and hanged to death by an Afghan criminal court for his terrorist crimes.